Hey guys, buckle up for a new episode of You and the Law Podcast, the one and only law enforcement podcast that's tackling critical policing and social justice issues and provides insights into the daily realities of policing with your host, Chief Virgil Green.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law Podcast. I'm the host of the show, Chief Virgil Green. And as always, I want to thank you for taking the time to tune in and join us on our LinkedIn page, on our YouTube channel, as well as our You and the Law Facebook page. And tonight, I've got my guest back on, Sean, and we're going to be, this is going to be part 3 of our conversation around a new book that he has coming out, and it's the 11 Fatal Flaws of Leadership. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Sean, and all of his guests that have joined us. So again, Sean, thank you for taking the time to come out and finish this conversation about your book and about the 11 Fatal Flaws of Leadership. And for those who have not seen the other 2 previous podcasts, just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write this book.
Sure. Well, thank you again, Chief, for having me on, and congratulations on your recent awards for all the things that your podcast is doing. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. The short story for me, I'm a Marine. I got on the Providence Police Department in Rhode Island back in 1999. I was fortunate enough to work my way through the ranks and work in many different bureaus and divisions while I was there. And I retired in 2022 after 23 years as a lieutenant and commanding officer, and had an amazing career. And after that, I was fortunate enough to be selected to be a leadership instructor for the FBI National Academy Association. And I was flown all over the country teaching law enforcement officers and executives all over the country a lot of the stuff that is in the book. And it's been a really exciting time. After that, my wife had some health issues, unfortunately. So she's better now, but I got out of the teaching because obviously being on the road sounds cool. And I loved what I was doing to meet everybody. But at the end of the day, family comes first. And I've been working in emergency management now while we get everything rolling with the book and the leadership mentorship course that's coming next. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Man, as always, I'm more honored than you are to have you because, I mean, you know, as I told you the first podcast, I mean, you were a police officer, lieutenant in the Providence, Rhode Island Police Department. And, you know, for those who do not know anything about Providence, you got to know the famous judge who recently, you know, passed away. And I think, you know, that show just really showed what kind of city Providence was and what kind of community that you were a police officer in. So again, you know, man, you know, I've got to get the autograph. You got to get the autograph.
I was going to say the same to you.
But as always, man, it is a pleasure. And, you know, we've had this conversation the last couple of weeks over, you know, the 11 Fatal Flaws of Leadership. And so tonight, I just want you to kind of, you know, walk us through some of the things that you saw that were real important to put into this book. And are there some examples that you can share with us? And if there's somebody who are listening, you know, if they want to chime in and put it in the chat or in the private chat, please do so. But just want to kind of dive a little bit more into, you know, these 11 fatal flaws. And, you know, what examples do you have to share with us about those leadership flaws?
Sure. That's a great question. And to finish answering your first one, what inspired me to write this was as I traveled the country and I talked to cops all over the place at every rank, all the way from patrol officer to chief, and in everything in between. It really gave me an amazing insight to what's going on in the profession, and where the challenges are, and obviously that's changed a little bit too in the last few years, but essentially it's the same. And as I got approached by a lot of the younger officers, younger supervisors that are relatively new to leadership ranks, the same questions kept coming up, and they were essentially like, are there any universal truths that I could use to avoid, any of the pitfalls that come with the profession? And so, as I was traveling, I did a ton of research on this over a really long time. And essentially, I took all different types of leadership failures from every industry and genre, and I found that they fell into 11 different categories. And essentially, that's the whole point of the title of that part of the book, of the 11 fatal flaws, which is what the book is based on. So the first 11 chapters, or each chapter is devoted to each one of the fatal flaws. And what I do is not only do I explain the concept, but I use two different stories. I think stories are really powerful, and because they allow people to, to see it in their mind. And I actually use real stories. So these are well-known instances from law enforcement that I use to show when things went wrong. And then in the same chapter, I also use another example to show when things go right. And most importantly is not just how it happened. I'm sorry, not just why, but how. What was the mechanism? What did the leader do or not do that led to failure or success? And being able to, and I tested this out, obviously talking to people, and I found that it held pretty true. That every leadership failure, because you can succeed a million different ways, but failure typically tends to land in one of these categories. And as we'll talk about for the remainder of the time, it spans the gamut, and there's nothing magic here. It's everything from conflict resolution to effective communication, how to delegate properly, and those types of things. So, and to give you an example, I think one of my favorites is, the first chapter. I talk about excessive ego, and I mean, it's sprinkled throughout the book, and the reason why it is because, as I discussed in there, it was even mentioned by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, when they studied thousands of companies, and they wanted to figure out what was it about the CEOs of companies that became great and stayed great. And other than essentially, having a very anti-fragile mindset, as I like to say, the main difference was their level of humility. And I think we've all seen in many cases, not just in the corporate world, but in law enforcement, the higher up people go, typically the more they can become full of themselves. And, that tends to their judgment is to impact their decision making, and it certainly impacts the way that they treat their team. So in that first chapter, I talk a lot about that. I use some very specific examples. Speaking about that particularly was Sheriff Joe Arpaio out in Maricopa County, and a lot of people know him as America's toughest sheriff, and a lot of things that he was known for. But what a lot of people don't know is at the end of his career, he kind of went off the rails, and
he did.
His persona and his ego kind of it grew larger than life, and when he was starting to ignore his attorneys and disobey court orders, and that's when things got really ugly. And it's unfortunate because he kind of wiped out an entire career of a lot of good things that were done during that time. So and that's not a dig on him, because I don't know the guy, and I didn't pick on him for any particular reason. And again, I mentioned it when we talked last time, me being a football coach, I'm very analytical when I look at these things. The same way when we watch body camera footage, right? I'm not casting any dispersions on the officer. I'm simply saying, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And that's the same thing I do here. It was to demonstrate that when you let your ego get in the way, it can have some really catastrophic results. Yeah. And and then the opposite is also true. of having a very, very high level of humility. And there are a number of examples that I go through there that, we can talk about more as the hour goes on.
Yeah. Well, Sean, you bring up a person who, was well known, the sheriff out in Maricopa County. And I think this is, you kind of see it when, sheriffs are elected officials. The politics kind of gets in the way of the job. And you kind of forget, you become a person who is put on a pedestal. And then you become pretty popular. Nobody really wants to challenge you. And so after over a period of time, he was in office for well over 20 years, maybe.
Right.
And like you said, his ego got to him, and he's not the only one. But I think, the one thing that I've seen in my career as being a police chief is that, people kind of forget where they come from, because you were never that sheriff, you were never that police chief. And when you do get in, whether it's a sheriff, a police chief, a city manager, any other elected official, a council member, mayor, whoever it may be, you kind of forget. And now it's almost kind of like, you done sold your soul to the devil, because somebody is in your pocket and you got to do what somebody else wants you to do. And I think that is something that has creeped into policing, the culture of policing. And I could be wrong, Sean. You've been around the country, you've talked to a lot of people. I think that is another flaw that's a fatal flaw in policing, is letting the system change you.
Right. And then I think that's where, when I break down, this philosophy. So in the title of the book's called AIO Leadership for Law Enforcement: The Proven Strategy That Legendary Leaders Use to Adapt, Improvise, and Overcome. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of that is, okay, so when people say, well, what does that mean? All right, it's a 3-step process. Adapt. How do I adapt? Okay, you adapt through awareness, right? So the first thing that you need is you need to be aware, self-aware. Obviously, in law enforcement, being situationally aware is extremely important as well, and both are extremely vital. So if you're not aware of how you're coming off to other people, how your body language, your tone of voice, that's a big deal. And so the first thing you need to have is that level of awareness to know, how am I acting, how am I coming off to, and you can base that obviously not only on being aware of of what you're doing, but watching the reaction of the people that you're speaking to. So that awareness is the foundation of everything, because if you're unaware, it's like having in your vehicle, if something is wrong and the engine isn't working right, if the check engine light doesn't come on, a lot of times we don't know there's a problem. So the first thing is having that level of awareness. And then mm-hmm. when we get into the improvise, that's through introspection, right? So be able to look inward and figure out, hey, where am I screwing up here? And then the last part, the overcome, is with the objective correction. And the reason why I put the O on there for objective is because for many, many years of working with people, it never really clicked until one day, working with my football team, the light bulb went on. And what happened was we had played a team that we were not supposed to beat. They were a much better team. And we did. And it was a very exciting time. And so, as we always did, weekend goes by, we come in on Monday, and the first thing we do is to go watch game film. And I noticed that as we're walking into the film room, everyone's just dragging their feet and their heads are hung low. And I can't understand, because they were, we were like, we're on the Super Bowl a couple days before. Mm-hmm. And after a few minutes, finally the light bulb went off. And what I realized was, as we were sitting in the room watching film, to the coaches, we're just watching film, breaking things down. But to the kids, these are high school age boys, right? Yeah. To them, they were getting embarrassed in front of their friends. They were mm-hmm. getting humiliated because they couldn't get past that part to actually understand what the correction was. Yeah. And as a leader, as a coach, it was, again, the awareness. So that was up to me to be aware of that. And then there were a couple of remedies that we took. We separated the team. We started doing things differently. But at the end of the day, I did, as Jocko Willink would say, I took extreme ownership. And I told my guys, listen, if you make a mistake, I was a quarterback coach. So if you make a mistake, then it's on me. Now, is it really my fault? No, and I knew that, and he knew that. But it tells that person, I've got your back. And even if, like I used to tell my guys, I'm like the heat shield on the front of the space shuttle. It doesn't mean we both won't burn up together, but I'll be there to take the heat before you do. Yeah, and that's really, really valuable, because especially in this profession, because people, and I'm speaking for myself, most officers, in my opinion, are not worried about, physically worried about their supervisor. They're not worried about them not backing them up or taking care of business when it's a hands-on event, but they are worried about what happens afterward. Right? I go out in the field, I have some type of a violent encounter, and usually, at least in the latter part of my career, when those types of events would happen, the next question after everybody's dust settles and everything is done, the next question is, oh man, how's the administration how's they gonna handle this? Are we gonna get in trouble? Is there someone gonna make a complaint? And that was whether you did it right, wrong, or indifferent. And if you work for a boss or an administration that has made it clear that they're not loyal to you, and I don't mean blindly loyal, I mean by giving you the benefit of the doubt, that's a really chilling situation to be in. And it's really, really difficult to get your guys and girls to go out there and and give it 100% if they don't feel like you've got their back. And I know you being a chief, I'm sure you understand that better than anyone.
Yeah, most definitely. And again, I like the word you use, what is the objective? Every single day, what is the objective? We come in, is it all about, catching the bad guy, or is it about how we patrolling the city, enforcing traffic laws, or whatever it may be? But there has to be an objective to the end, because to me, if you don't have that objective, you're just kind of like floating around. You're out there, and you're looking for something. And so, but what is the real purpose of that? And so,
right.
Just like, Sean, I implemented a new program in the police department. It was called ComStat. ComStat is, you heard about it, something that, Bratton started up in New York. And, I took from that, and you talk about, the legendary leaders in policing, and, and I'm always somebody who, even if you don't know these individuals, but you can pick up on some of the traits, and if it worked there, how can you make it work in a much smaller environment or a mid-sized city police department? And a lot of people are kind of like, oh man, that's not going to work. Well, you got to have an objective to get to the end, because for me, it's looking at the data. What is that data telling us about the crime that's going on in the city, and how can we predict some things, and how can we put ourselves there to prevent some crimes? And it's real interesting, because after all of that information is, you sit down with everybody, and people start seeing it on a map, and people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I never thought about that. Well, my objective was to say, listen, it'll take some time, but we'll get there, and you'll see the picture. And
right.
And so, and I think that is something that oftentimes people kind of lose sight of, is what is the objective of what we're trying to do.
Right. And the beauty of using that word is just like the awareness, situational and self. Same thing for the objectivity. And because the dual purpose of that word is also to say, when you're looking at what you just did, be objective. Don't inject your personality to it. Same thing, to use the football analogy. If one of my quarterbacks threw an interception, it was because he made a bad read, not because he's a jerk, not because there's something wrong with his character. And that's the point, is we need to separate our ego from our actions. And it's very much easier said than done, especially in this profession. But the point that I'm trying to make there is it becomes infinitely easier for everyone in the organization to do that if that's what the leadership is doing. If leadership is being humble, if leadership is owning their mistakes, if leadership is being transparent, those are huge variables, and they're not just buzzwords. Those things mean something, because when the men and women that go out there to risk their lives every night to protect the community, they're doing it just like anybody in the military says, right? You know, when people you see that go out there that are veterans, and me being one, we're not, you know, as much as we sign up for God and country and all that stuff, everyone will say the same thing. You're fighting for the person next to you. Same thing out on the street. You're making sure that that guy or girl that's next to you is going home safe to their family, and everything is gravy after that. So, but that sounds really easy. It rolls off the tongue. But as we all know, you know, after those few minutes of adrenaline start to wear off, and the reality of your career potentially being hanging in the balance, that weight can be a lot for a lot of officers, especially if their administration hasn't had a habit of backing them.
Exactly, Sean. And I think another thing, Sean, is we talk about the 11 fatal flaws of leadership, part 3, is that, you know, everybody makes mistakes. Nobody is perfect. And I think you have to give officers that to know, hey, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Just kind of like you know, being a quarterback. If you throw that interception, that doesn't mean that I'm pulling you out the game. It just means make sure you read the play better the next time, or tuck the ball and run. Don't throw it.
Yeah, right. Throw it away.
Yeah. Make a play.
Make a sack.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, do whatever, but, you know, don't turn the ball over. And again, I think, you know, in this profession is, you know, if you go out and you do something, and it's not the end of the world. And I think, you know, Sean, you've been around, you know, your dad come up through the Providence Police Department. So you've been around a lot of what we call old school policing.
Yes, sir.
And that old school policing was pretty harsh. It made people kind of feel like, man, this dude is an ass. I mean, and he's making me feel bad. Do I even want to come back? And I think, you know, you don't really see that in today's policing culture. But I want to ask you this, you know, coming up, is there some good to that, or is there some bad to that?
To what?
To coming up in that culture where it's really right there in your face. If you make a mistake, you got somebody who's jumping down your throat, kind of like that, you know, I'm going to use this, you know, Vince Lombardi, you know, coaching kind of style, in your face. If you know, grabbing
love.
that toughness.
Yeah,
you know?
I that's a great question. And you know what? I really do. And let me qualify that. I think that the things that I really appreciated about that, and it's interesting too, because not only because of when I was born, but where I came on the job, you know, it was in '99, so we were kind of at the tail end of all the craziness from when crack was hitting the streets and all that stuff. So then community policing was being a thing. So there were a lot of paradigm shifts in law enforcement around that time. So I got to kind of be there for the end of the old school and kind of the beginning of the new school, if you would. And the thing that I appreciated about the old school was the work ethic, the accountability, and what I mean by that, even down to just post responsibility, like it was a thing. Like if you had a call on your post, say you got a car accident, another call came in, everyone knew, nope. And the officer would take it as a sign of pride. I can handle my post. Don't worry about it. I got it. So, having that mentality, that work ethic, the accountability, the teamwork, even if you didn't like somebody, you kept your differences aside and dealt with it, privately. But there was also another side to that I didn't like. And I didn't like the lack of a growth mindset. It was kind of like, that's where the expression, this is the way we've always done it. It comes from that.
Yeah.
So as much as there's some foundational things, some values that are fantastic, I think we needed to grow as a profession when it came to some of the what some would call soft skills, being able to talk our way through things, de-escalation. If you use the word de-escalation in my department in the 80s, you get punched in the mouth. Like that was, it was like no one even knew what that meant. That was like, did an elevator break, or is that what when you go skiing?
Probably wasn't even in the dictionary.
Yeah, but again, it's the same thing when I explained when I was traveling teaching with the FBI, telling people, if you want to understand people, look at where they came from, right? So these cops, their parents were the greatest generation. A lot of them grew up with parents that had been through the Depression, through all the tumultuous stuff that happened. So that was their mindset. They didn't grow up with a lot. Most people didn't go to college. Most people, had military experience, and we're kind of the mirror image of that now. There are very, very few officers, relatively speaking, that are military veterans. It's kind of flip-flopped. It's more same numbers that used to be. Older generation was a lot more veterans, not as many college graduates. Now it's kind of flip-flop, where it's only a little bit of veterans and more college graduates. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I think what it's about is managing that generation. And, the last time we spoke, I talked about this, of being in a class and having a chief that had been on 50 years. And, I was teaching a segment on communication, and I started explaining that you're running roll call. You tell an officer, hey, go by this address and drop a parking tag on any cars that are parked illegally in front of that house. And the officer says, why? And as I say that, the chief starts huffing and puffing and losing his mind, because in his generation that was considered disrespectful.
Yeah.
Right. You don't ask why. You just do what you're told.
You
stand in the back and you look pretty until we ask you something. And obviously with the newer generation, it doesn't necessarily automatically make it disrespectful, right? Because if someone just says, hey, why, that's different than why, or sucking my teeth, like it's a totally different reaction. But again, from a leadership standpoint, right? When we talk about commander's intent, if they don't say anything, just do it because I told you to. I mean, how well did that work when we were when we were kids, when our parents tried that? But think about if you said, hey, the lady that lives at that address, needs to go to get dialysis, and somebody keeps blocking the driveway so the van can't get in to pick her up. And I mean, I'm just picking an example. But by explaining, by telling them what they're doing and why they're doing it, it just gives it meaning. It makes them feel like they're not just running an errand for you, because that's not why they joined the police department. Because you know what? When they got on and when I got on, that's how we were brought up. So you stand in the back, you don't say anything. You wait until you're called on to speak. And that's not the way it is with this generation. So it doesn't mean that they're automatically bad. It just means that there is an element of meeting them halfway. And I think that's where a lot of the old school people have a problem with it, is because they're not willing to meet them halfway. They're not willing to try to bridge the gap a little bit. It's basically come to me, do it my way or the highway. And I don't think that's necessarily fair either.
Exactly. Hey, Sean, I just want to remind those who are just now tuning into You and the Law podcast that tonight's topic is the 11 fatal flaws of leadership, part 3. And if you got any questions, put them in the chat. There's Sean. We got about 8 people who are on. Now I want to let you. So I can have up to 10 guests. So if we get to 11, if we get more than 10, some people may not be able to join. So if you are hearing this and kind of wondering why you can't join, I can have up to 10 guests at one time. And so I just sent a message to Robert. If I see him up on the screen, if he wanted to join us. So, Sean, if I can bring Robert on, he's about the only one that has this, that I can bring on the screen. Everybody else just has their cameras off. So let's see what Robert has to say. He was typing, so let's see. There he is.
Oh, there he is.
Robert,
man,
can you hear us?
Legend. We can't hear you for some reason.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Robert. Well, I can't hear him. I can see him moving, but he was typing. I think Kaylin. I think your daughter is somebody. Is it Kaylin?
Kaylin, yes.
Yeah, she's
captain of
typing
my
a message.
support team.
She says we can't hear him, unfortunately. So Robert, we can't hear you. I think
Come
once
on, get that hammer out.
once you get something
How's
worked out.
that?
Yeah, there
There
you
he
go.
There
is.
we go.
Yeah, there we
Hallelujah.
go.
He was second for IT. It was patrol.
Yes.
IT was second.
I am not an IT guy
All right.
at all.
All right. Hey, I saw your camera on, Robert. So I just wanted to bring you on and see if you had anything to say or add to the conversation.
No, listen. My lieutenant, as Sean was my lieutenant a while back. Listening to everything he's saying, I can't agree any more than what he's said and what you've said. The old school, I got on in '87, and Sean's absolutely right. You know, it was a different era, and there was a lot of different things going on back then, and a lot of the old school stuff was great.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also some issues with the old school stuff.
Yeah.
But we progress, we move on, and I still think that we came from one of the better departments, I think, in New England. I really do. I mean that. But I'm sitting back, I'm listening, and I'm enjoying this. So I don't want to take Sean's spotlight. So I'll just sit back, and if he wants me to chime in, I'll chime in.
Okay.
Oh,
All
please
right.
do. And just see, he's too humble, right? So the part that, and thank you for everything you said. But to be completely honest, he trained me. He trained everybody. Bob is one of the most incredible tactical guys that I've ever met in my entire career. He's one of the most humble. But one of the things that really drew me to him was his honesty. Sometimes brutal honesty, but it was funny. So he trained me as a recruit in the academy, and I mean, I looked up to him like a god. And so I finally make it to lieutenant, and the only reason he never did was just because of family and schedules and things, because he was an amazing leader, and one of the very few guys that everybody knew, no matter what, he was going to fight for you hard, fairly, and if you screwed up, he would tell you, sorry, I'm not gonna, because you screwed up. And that was exactly why I respected him. And the funny part was, when I became a lieutenant, and forgive me, Bob, for saying so, but certain people felt that he was kind of a naysayer. And I used to say to them, you say that because he's calling bullshit. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Just because you don't like what he's saying doesn't make him a jerk. So back to my comment earlier, right? Separate the comment from the person. He was making very good observations about places in our department that needed to be improved. And because people had their own personal agendas, they had their own egos involved, it made it very difficult for them to hear that. And the irony was, when I eventually became a lieutenant, even though, and he'll tell you, we had a number of disagreements, but that's the beauty of our friendship, was we can have a disagreement and just move past. That's a thing, and you put it on the shelf and whatever, because it never changed the way that we interacted. And when I became a lieutenant, I leaned on him more than ever, because he was a sergeant when I think I was in high school. Remember when I interned? Now that I say it out loud, I interned. I was 1992.
Wow.
Now you're letting everybody know how old I am.
Yeah, Robert, I was going to say, man, he just put your age out there.
I don't look bad for 84, do I?
What did you say? You said what?
I don't look bad for 84.
84. Oh, come on, man.
But
now,
then,
you're not a day past 50.
Thank you.
but then later to become his boss was bizarre in a lot of ways, honestly, because of the relationship that we had always had. And but there were a lot of times that I would go to him because I knew he was going to shoot me straight. He was going to tell me, hey, you're good, you're bad, or about an issue or a decision that was made. And I think it was funny because that was one of the things that I got a lot of pushback from the other bosses, because they felt, first of all, they already were threatened by him to begin with. Secondly, they thought that I was like selling out to the devil as far as they were concerned. Well, they obviously knew my personality. And my point, I mean, I never said it to them, was Well, I wish you were the same. I wish you had the humility to listen to him, because you know what? Just because if he says, hey, you got something in your teeth, he's being a friend to me. He's saying, hey, same thing on the job when we would have to make a decision about something that we needed to do, or a personnel matter or a tactical maneuver. Hey, Bob, what do you think about this? And people almost like you're supposed to be this God that knows everything. And by the mere fact that you ask someone, God forbid someone that's below your rank, then it's like you're telling the world, I don't know anything, or I'm a dummy. And I would say it's exactly the opposite. This guy has forgotten more about tactical situations than I would ever know. I would be the dummy to be that ego guy to say, I'm going to make a decision because I'm lieutenant and I'm just by virtue of my rank makes me smarter. And now I'm going to do something stupid that he's going to sit back and say, I told you so. And so to me, that was a huge deal. Was, like the quote says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's why I always wanted Bob in my room.
Yeah.
And for the one to say, hey, your fly's unzipped too.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
You have a way with words.
Well, and, guys, and I think that is what has, and this isn't just a problem now. This has just been a problem a long time. It's that the culture of policing is where everybody kind of has their own opinions or ideas about how certain things are supposed to work, or who's supposed to say something, or who's not supposed to say something. And then you get into the cliques, and now everybody is over here in this clique and that clique. And instead of just saying, okay, I've only been on the department a couple of years, but this guy's been around for 15 to 20 years. So obviously he knows what's going on. So again, it just kind of goes back to, as we're talking about the 11 fatal flaws of leadership, people need to kind of understand that they got flaws as well, but they don't really want those flaws pointed out to them.
Sure. And they have to understand, again, I always revert back to the analogy of a football team, right? If I have a barricaded suspect, right, and I have to pick a sergeant and he's working, he's absolutely the guy that's going. I remember one situation that we were in that I think he was going off shift, and I called him and he was like driving home and turned around and I held everything for him. And I remember, a boss above me giving me hell because he didn't like Bob. And I said, well, put your feelings aside. I said, How did it end? It ended successfully. And it's not that I could not have led us through it, but I felt it was ignorant and borderline reckless of me, given his experience, to be stubborn and ignorant and say, no, I'm smart because I got these bars on my shoulder, and that makes me a genius. And for anyone that that gave me a hard time about it, I never really cared, because like I said, at the end of the day, the situation ended successfully. And that was, we talk about it in the Marines. We're not too smart, so we keep it very simple. Leadership is 4 words: mission, accomplishment, and troop welfare, right? Like, get the job done and take care of your people. That's it. Everything else is gravy. You didn't hear me say politics. You didn't hear me say cliques or, quid pro quo or any of those foolish things, because as you mentioned earlier, that's always the flip side of that coin, right? Is if you're on the A team and that's what gets you to that position, now you're beholden to, as we used to call it, your godfather. Now there's somebody that has a chip that they're holding and they're just waiting for the day to cash that in. And when you don't play that game, obviously it's a lot harder to swim upstream, like Bob and myself. But at the end of the day, we never have to duck and see someone out in public. Oh man, guy, like, we can look people straight in the eye. We shot them straight, and even though they may not have always appreciated the decisions that we made the best decision that we thought was fair and right at the time. And that's a really powerful thing, to have that reputation precede you with the guys and girls that are out there on the street.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so you're calling him Bob and I'm calling him Robert. So
either one is fine.
Either one is fine. Okay.
Sir Robert, if you will.
Sir Robert. All right. All right, then.
Half my family calls me one or the other. So.
Okay. All right. You got anything else to add, Bob, Robert?
As Sean said, with our leadership that we've had in the past, a lot of it too is with our department. It's the testing issues that we have, because It's basically what you can study for, what you can remember, what you can squeeze in, knowing that you don't have to worry about remembering any of that later on down the line after the test is taken.
Mm-hmm.
There's no leadership course that we take that gets us prepared to be leaders.
Yeah.
So, and I fault the department, and I have throughout the years faulted our department for that, for not having any type of, other than a written test, a formality to get us in the right position for the right things, for the right people, for the right time. And it's just horrible. So I fault our department for that.
Yeah. So I want to ask both of you guys this questions. A lot of agencies rely on, and when I say this isn't talking about lowering the standards at all, but it's about the institution of saying, okay, here's a test. But what do you need to do to prepare before the test and for you to be successful? Because is that test really going to, if you pass or fail, what does that test really say about that individual who took it? So to me, I think there needs to be another way of really measuring individuals and really putting them in a position to say, hey, we're going to send you to this leadership, course, and to prepare you to become a sergeant. Because, Robert, me and Sean talked about this on a previous podcast. I don't know if you were listening to the other two podcasts, but all of a sudden, here's somebody being put in as a sergeant, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. Yeah. But then when they screw up, a lieutenant or is going to jump down their throat and say, why did you do what you did? And you're going to sit there and say, well, I thought I was doing the right thing. So I think we need to have a better system in place that will put people in a position to be more successful. And again, it's not to lower the standards, but what is that test really saying? And I think some agencies, again, they kind of go back, well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, there has to be a better way of doing it. And I think you need to listen to people.
Yeah. And I think one of the faults that we have too is that we worry about talking about leadership or introducing leadership when the test is about to get there. And I've always believed that leadership should be taught right from the academy. So if Sean could come in and teach the academy, say, listen, not only is this what leadership is as far as what you should do to be a leader, it's also just as important to know who a good leader is.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times you talk about cliques and everything else. A lot of times people will follow somebody thinking they're a good leader.
Exactly.
They have no schooling. And then, like you said, the lieutenant gets mad at the sergeant for doing the wrong thing. Well, a lot of the times the lieutenant who's telling you that you did the wrong thing doesn't know what they're doing, or the captain, because let's face it, if you're a sergeant that gets promoted and you get promoted to lieutenant, doesn't mean you learned anything from sergeant to lieutenant or lieutenant to captain. Yeah. A lot of these people I've seen a couple of chiefs come through my time that made it all the way to chief and had no leadership ability.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things with me just being a police chief for 25 years is that you're always learning. You got to learn something. And the one thing that I share with you guys I think a lot of people kind of get hung up on what size of the department you came from. And I said this in a chief's interview back in my home state in New Mexico, when they said, hey, you've never led a department this size. And I said, but you're leading people. And it's not about the size of the department. It's about how well you're communicating with people. And because, you get this deal of people saying, well, this is a 200-man department or a 400-man department. What skills do you have to lead that many people? Well, what skills does anybody have to lead that many people? And I think, again, we have to go back and look at the people and putting people in a position to be successful. And Robert, as you mentioned, leadership should really start day one in the academy, there should really be a lot more emphasis put on leadership. And I think, it's still important to know how to go out there and shoot 100, but I think it's just as important to know uh, what kind of leadership skills a person has and doesn't have, and can you bring in people, like Sean and others to teach leadership.
And that's the thing that we were talking about last week was, the one thing that I didn't see anywhere that I went was any type of leadership pipeline. There was no way of identifying. I mean, I say there were a couple of departments that had like a corporal rank, senior officer kind of thing, which is great. Because, being an informal leader can sometimes be much more powerful than having rank. And we both know exactly what those types of people look like. But the trick is are we identifying people, or like Bob was saying, in our department, to answer your question, you know what it took to get promoted? Be a good memorizer. Right. But how many, and I'm not making this up. I know on my promotion, I remember what time can you sell chickens, in Kennedy Plaza, and how many square inches of reflective material do you have to have on the back of your wheelchair as you ride down the breakdown? Like, what are you talking about? Like, just because I know the size of a school bus side view mirror doesn't mean that I'm going to be, the guy you want standing there when bullets are flying, and I understand that worked. But like we've been saying, just because it used to work doesn't mean it still does.
Yeah.
And, and unfortunately, one of the other byproducts of that, and it really lent itself to the politics, because it really boiled down to where you were. What I mean by that is guys that were in patrol, guys and girls in patrol, they didn't get the advantages that people that were in the non-patrol jobs, right? They worked in an area where they could turn the radio off, come to work and study for 8 hours, where the guys and girls on the street were shagging calls. Yeah. And I mean, we studied it. We went back through all the lists, and it was 70-80% of non-uniformed individuals. And you can't ignore the trends. Yeah. So, but the reason why I mention it is because that's a thing. Right. Yeah. We weren't the only ones that knew that. Everybody knew that. So if you're the person that wants to get promoted, that if you really want to get on the fast track, get on the A-team, get into that clique, do what those guys want you to do. And then you're going to get help. They're going to make sure that you get what you need to get to where you have to go. Whereas people that are naysayers, people that talk back and don't say the things that, that don't say how high when they say jump, those are the people that don't get the shortcuts and don't get the bennies and have to grind it out and swim upstream. But at the end of the day, to me, that really comes down to what's your character, what level of integrity do you have? Because, and the same thing that we were talking about last week, Chief, right? It's because when people get promoted to chief, then they act surprised when the mic gets shoved in their face. Yeah. And now they have to say something, right? Now one of your officers gets involved in a deadly shooting or a car accident or some type of use of force incident, and now all of a sudden they're the matador. Now it's when it's like, how did you not know that wasn't gonna come? So if you were that guy or girl all the way to the time that you got there, like, don't bail out now. And listen, I understand that it's easier said than done, but my point, Chief, is if you're taking that position, you've got to know that you've got to be willing to drop your belt and say, no, I won't do that.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And tell that mayor or that city manager or that is not right, and I'm not doing it. And unfortunately, there are too many people out there that are in those positions today that won't. Yeah. And that's what we're watching happen.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, and I think we spoke about this either on the first podcast or the second podcast, that, over 75% of police departments around the country are departments of 10 men and under. Just kind of think about that. You've got a mayor or a city manager who's putting guys or ladies in these positions, and what kind of leadership skills do you have? Are you somebody who's just a friend of a friend to say, oh, we'll put him in, they'll make a good chief until we find a chief? I think that's reckless. And I think, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, well, it's funny you say that, because I have friends throughout the years, particularly down south, where the new sheriff comes in. One day I'll talk to a friend of mine, and he's a sergeant. The next day I talk to him, he's a lieutenant. The next day I talk to him, he's a deputy. Yeah. and it had nothing to do with tests. It had to do with, somebody comes in, they're the new boss, so they rearrange everything and say, okay, you're promoted, you're demoted, you're a lateral transfer, no rhyme or reason, just because I'm putting my friends where I want them, and it had nothing to do with leadership ability to put anybody anywhere. So they had no test. It was politically appointed throughout the ranks of the department.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I think, you find it in, small rural agencies where, somebody doesn't like the chief and he got put in that position because for whatever reason. But then you wonder why departments have such a high turnover, and you wonder why departments they're not paying very well. And so, but again, it all goes back to training. And I think it goes back to agencies really making that investment. Sean, I think you have to really make that investment in people, and people need to know that they see, just like me. If I see something in an officer and I say, hey, I want to send you to FBI leader, these courses. Well, that's that's an investment. And so what is the return on, if you show me that this is something that you really want to do, then, you got to take that opportunity. We got to give that person that opportunity to be successful. So, yeah, again, it just really kind of goes back to the training. And also it starts at the top. If you don't have a leader, Robert, you was with the department for a very long time. You probably seen quite a few chiefs come through. And if the chief does not set the tone for that department, at some point there's going to be some cracks.
And honestly, if I can add to that, Chief, when you say training is important, but intent is also. We talked about this last time. Because if I know that I've been a sergeant for 3 years and now you're sending me to the sergeant school after I've been doing the job for 3 years, and I know, because people have even said it openly, the only reason we're doing this is because we need to check a box for CALIA, to keep our accreditation.
Yeah.
That doesn't give you the warm, fuzzy feeling that it might. Though that it should, I should say. You know what I mean? Like the difference between what you described was sending somebody to a place they wanted to go to advance their career. What we're talking about is, you're up next. Get in there. Let's go. Get back to work. It doesn't make any sense. That's like I don't give somebody the keys to my car at 16 and then tell them they have their driving test when they're 19. Like that's not how it works. But that's what we do every day. And that's why I even call one of the chapters "Fake It Till You Fail." Because in this profession, there is no fake it till you make it. It's either you get lucky or you lose.
Yeah. Hey, we got a comment in the chat from Bruce. He says, "What is the impact of unions relative to grooming officers and selecting officers for training?" Are there unions in Providence?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
And
I'll let Bob speak to that. He was our union president for a while, so he can speak to that.
Yeah, and I think some people, again, it kind of goes back to who's who, and so does that kind of sway into to anything related to the question?
Yeah. So, as Sean said, I was a union president for a couple of years with our department, and I tried to get testing changed, and it's not an easy process. You're not only dealing with your members, and no matter what you say, half of them are going to disagree with you.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with your executive board, and a lot of them don't ask for anything or take anything until we're given something, which is the old style union thinking.
Yeah.
So when you try to change stuff, it's not easy. Politics plays the game. The administration plays the game. Your body wants you. Well, for example, testing. A lot of I think it's a great idea that we continue with the testing, and that's because they can test well. They can memorize, as Sean said earlier. They can memorize and they can take the test. Other departments will suggest other things. Going to school, and a lot of people don't like that. And then, the union jumps in. Well, you're going to pay us overtime while you're at the school. You're not going to pay us overtime. We're not going. So it's not an easy process to get everybody together to look for the right thing. Even the leadership school. So when they started sending us to the leaderships, I shouldn't say sending everybody. They didn't send everybody. As Sean said, you could be a sergeant, sergeant for 3 years, and then they send you to the school. One of the classes that I went to, the problem is that you have the wrong leadership training. And I'll give you an example. We had a CEO from a very large bank, and because he was the leader of 3,000 employees, they thought it would be great to take him in. He didn't have to deal with a union. He didn't have to deal with budgets. He could hire and fire who he wanted when he wanted. So it had nothing to do with the same leadership that we had to do with the union, with hiring and firing, with training, with the budget. He didn't have to deal with that. So he's just telling us, oh, well, you have a problem, you go to HR, you get rid of the person. No, we couldn't do that. It didn't help us out at all. But as far as the unions getting involved, it's not an easy thing because, again, you're dealing with the executive board, the politicians, contracts. Is your contract up? Because now you're fighting for other things. So it's not an easy thing to Bruce's question. I'm hoping I answered what he was asking. But
Well, and one of the things you just mentioned, Robert, is that the training. What kind of person is an agency bringing in to conduct the training?
That's a whole other podcast.
It is. And Sean, we're going to have a part 4 because, again, as Robert just mentioned, that's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother hour conversation around bringing in the right people for the training. And because, and this, Sean, you taught with the FBI Academy all around the country. And if you don't bring in the right training, if that's a 3-day training or a whole week training, day 1, you're going to lose a lot of people. Day 2, people are going to be like, okay, I'm here. I'm getting paid to do it. And at the end of it, I got a certificate that says, oh, you completed this 40-hour training, or you completed this, whatever, how many hours it was. But what did you really get out of the training? And what was that person? So, Robert, as you mentioned, why bring a CEO in to talk to a police department about leadership when what does he bring other than he's the CEO of a bank versus bringing in somebody even from a much larger department from NYPD or LAPD to say, okay, well, this is what we did in our agency. It may not work in this agency, but this is the leadership that we taught. And I think people will walk away from that and really just walk away with something more valuable.
See, if I could just interject,
Go ahead,
because this one really struck a nerve with me. And the reason why is because there's a variable, Chief, that we haven't talked about, and that's the ego part, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because there were a bunch of people in my organization, at one point that they would not send you to leadership training because they didn't want you to have it. You were a threat to them. And so they weren't giving you anything, and quite frankly, that was the quid pro quo was the system. If you wanted to get taken care of, then you had to do what the people in the 18 were doing. And if you didn't, then you were on the outside looking in and trying to fight the system. And that's a daunting thing because it sounds easy and it sounds cool. But guys like Bob and I gotten wrapped up in that stuff, and everybody else was like, ooh, I don't know about all that. Like, I think I'm just going to keep on doing my thing here and, not worry about that. Let those guys fight with them. I just want to get through, do my 20 and, take the kids to the Cape with the wagon. You know what I mean? So it's same thing we said about Chiefs. It's great. Everybody wants the promotion. They want the take home car. They want the money. They want the fancy office. But then that's not when you're earning your money. When you're earning your money is at 3 a.m. at that shooting scene or at 8 a.m. in front of the city council, or the next day in front of the news channels with 20 mics jammed in your face. And now you got to explain why this video that may not look very good, why it went down the way it did. And that's when everybody's watching. Everybody that works for you is going, okay, what's he going to say? You know what I mean? Is he going to back us? Is he at least going to give us the benefit of the doubt? Or as we've seen, there have been instances where they just shoved someone headfirst into the wood chipper right out of the gate, didn't even give him a chance to, like I used to say, we arraign, these murderers and crackheads and robbers and rapists, like they get due process. Why don't we? We don't even treat our own people with the same respect and dignity that we treat criminals, So I think if we take and apply that to our own agencies and our own organizations, our own teams, people would be amazed. And it's amazing how much people forget. They forget, like you said, that they were there. They forget what it was like to worry about if your boss wasn't going to have your back. Because now they've been up in the ivory tower for a while. They've been on the 18. They've been protected. So to them, they feel invincible. And in many cases they are. But that's not the reality for most of us out on the street.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I've done throughout my leadership, throughout my career of being a police chief, is that if you get a phone call or a text saying, hey, there's an officer involved shooting, or hey, there's a situation and the news media is here, you better get your butt up at 8 a.m. and put on the form, and you better go out there. I think, a lot of people are shocked and surprised to see a police chief up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And then you end up going to, the day shift roll call, and you have to be visible. And I think that's that I've seen leaders have really gotten away from, because, Sean, I said this to you in the first podcast, is that, coming out of Oklahoma City, a lot of people, the only time they saw the chief was the day that they graduated. They never saw the chief again until maybe they got in trouble. And I heard that from a lot of people who worked for Oklahoma City Police Department. And that's not good. If you don't have that kind of connection, even if you are the police chief of a 1,000-man police department, well, you should get to know almost everybody.
Yeah.
You should.
But and to your point, Chief, and if you don't, all the more reason to make good leadership decisions, because if you don't interact with your team, all they have to figure out how they feel about you is by watching what you do. So, and there was one incident that comes to mind right away. We had an officer involved. The guy shot at him. They shot each other, and one got hit. But the point is when the chief goes to the hospital, he visits the bad guy before the cop. Like that might sound like semantics, but it was a big deal, and everybody noticed it. And what would you think? If you're a guy or girl on the job, and you get involved in a shooting incident, and you're in one room and the bad guy's down the hall in the other room, and the chief seems more concerned with how the bad guy's doing than how the cop is doing. Optics matter, and we used to say it all the time. And the higher I went, the more obvious it became that the reality is almost irrelevant. The perception is what counts, because that's what everybody thinks. It doesn't matter what really happened, because how many times have you seen in the newspaper the next day, you read the story and it's unrecognizable when you were there, and go, this whole thing is totally different than what actually went down.
Exactly.
It's really important. Again, it's really important that everybody knows that you're going to back them, because we're not playing football. People's lives are on the line. People's careers are on the line. People's livelihoods, your family could potentially be affected by the decisions that you make, so there's a lot at stake. And I think that, again, it all goes back to the awareness, and having all of those things, being present, caring about your people, letting them know, because if you do care, it doesn't really count if they don't know it. So that's the point too, is to make sure, especially in the difficult times, because that's when you make your bones. That's when it's easy. We make a big bust. Great. We lay all the guns out, put the money, and everybody takes pictures. But like you said, that 3 a.m., I remember being at calls, and it would be like some standoff for 3-4 hours. And then it was over at 3 a.m. And it was like, you know what? Go to the one place that was open and buy a couple pizzas. Hey guys, hey, have some pizza. Hey, everybody good? Just showing that you care is a lot simpler than most people think.
Yeah. Hey guys, there's a comment I want to get to in the chat from Randy. He says, great leaders are those who develop great leaders, just like the great coaches who create great coaches. And Randy, you're right. And I think, the one thing that Sean, you talk about being a coach, a quarterback coach. You see a lot of these coaches around the country um, who, somebody coached with, what's the Alabama coach? Nick Saban.
Nick Saban.
Nick Saban. Uh, there's so many coaches who were under Nick Saban who are now head coaches. So they got something from Nick Saban that led them to becoming a head coach. Just like at the University of Oklahoma, where I'm from in Oklahoma, the coach there. He's helped so many other coaches under him.
Yeah,
And I
Bob
don't
Stoops.
think, yeah, Bob Stoops. And I don't think we really uh, take advantage of that in this profession of policing is that, and like you said, Sean, it goes back to the ego. You get hung up on the ego and basically understanding that I'm not going to be the police chief here forever. I'm not going to be the lieutenant here forever. So I need to be putting somebody else in a position to become that next leader. And so it's all about growth, helping people become leaders, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're not going to be around for a long time.
Yeah,
So,
and that's the point. When in the book I refer to that as a leader producer. And Randy is an amazing leader. He was the chief. Congratulations to him just retiring. But he's a rock star. He's a very intelligent guy and has some really incredible insights that I hope everybody gets to hear from him. But when he mentioned Simon Sinek's book, I just saw one of the comments pop up. Simon Sinek learned that from the Marines. So Bobby's a Marine. Right, we're devil dogs, and what he noticed there is, I remember going to an event with some other bosses, and it was really ironic because, again, being in the Marines, it was an automatic thing. It was unspoken. So we go to this event, it's a couple of other bosses, a couple of patrol officers, and when they lay out the food, all the other bosses walk up and they get the front of the line, because we're the bosses, right? Like, get out of the way, here we are. Well, I go to the back, and they're all looking at me like they have no idea what's going on. Now, I haven't said anything. But it made it a little obvious because for formal things, and for stuff like this, we were wearing white shirts. So lieutenants and above wear white shirts. Everybody else is in blue. So all the white shirts in the front and I'm in the back. And so one of them later said to me, "What was that all about?" And I said, "That's just how it goes." And I explained it, right? It's you let your troops eat first. It's a sign of respect.
Yeah.
And the difference is, like we talk about in the Marine Corps, it's ingrained in you. The entire organization lives and breathes that way. So when they know that that's how everybody is, and it starts from the top, from the commandant all the way down to the lowly privates, it's ingrained in you, it's taught, and it means a lot but it only means a lot if it's applied consistently and if it's done all the time.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, what they didn't even understand is that's your way as a leader of saying, no, you eat first. I'll be last, So when I would send guys that had small children home on Christmas Day, even as a lieutenant, and I'm shagging calls, and I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't say, "Hey guys, look at me, I'm super cool." It just happened, and if people found out, they found out, because my number one rule has been and always will be, I want to be the boss that I would want to work for. If I work for this guy or girl, if I had two kids that are 2 and 4, I want to be there to open the gifts. You only get so many Christmases. So
exactly.
If that person is willing to shag my calls and do a domestic, and I'm asking people, how do you fill out this form? Because I haven't seen this new form that we use here. It didn't matter to me, but I knew that. And the weird part is, some of those people actually tried burning me, and just doing silly things later. And I would have bosses say to me, "Why do you still do that?" And I never forget it. That same thing that I asked that question many years before, and somebody looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're doing it for you. You're doing it because that's what a stand-up boss does. If they don't respect that and they don't honor it, then shame on them. But you're still doing what you need to do." And again, easier said than done. But when you get into that habit and people know that that's your character and that's the way that you operate, it really goes a long, long way with the team. A lot more. It runs deeper than most people think.
Yeah. Well, hey, Sean, just like I've said on many other podcasts, man, this hour goes by so quick, and we're having a great conversation, and so Robert, I definitely thank you for
Thank you.
chiming in, and
Thank you, Chief.
your voice is real important, and so Sean, you know, can we do a part 4, man?
I look forward to it. I look forward to it. And I will say to Bob on the record, because and he'll tell you I've been trying to tweak him for how many years now, because if he could just open his head up, whatever would spill out would be like more than like I said, and I mean this with all sincerity. He knows, especially from a tactical standpoint,
Mhm.
and a leadership standpoint, he's forgotten more than most people ever know, and it'd be a shame to
Mhm.
waste all that. I mean, and Bob knows, I was very humble even with the team. I would go back to the range and go, "Hey, I screwed this up, man. Like, what should I have done here?"
Mhm.
And I've said to them, "Hey, I had a crazy situation last night, and what you taught me was a huge thing, right? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. See, drive, smile, and wave. It's all up there. Don't worry, buddy." But but I did that because just like anyone else, that's a thankless job. And I knew that not a lot of people went back to them and said, "Hey, man, what you taught me saved my life."
Yeah.
And that's an easy example because it's a tactical one. It's a little more complicated from a leadership standpoint, but
Mhm.
literally, tactically, it's physical life and death. But in a leadership standpoint, it's career life and death. And
Yeah.
as we all know, the stress of I never got up and thought I'm gonna go die today. I'm gonna get shot at work. But I don't know
Yeah.
how many times I thought my boss could screw me over today.
Yeah.
And that's what we live in. That's the boiling water that cops live in. That's
Mhm.
what lends itself to the addiction problems and all the other things that cops get themselves into trouble with. And I'm
Mhm.
not blaming it on them. I'm just saying if you're already having an issue and your boss isn't smart enough or have the courage enough to approach you and say, "Hey, what's going on?" or they
Yeah.
just don't care, then you get what you get, But
Yeah.
when you have a leader that
Exactly.
cares, that takes care of their team, it's
Mhm.
never going to be perfect, and they're not always going to do what they're supposed to do. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, you can go to sleep knowing that you don't have to look over your shoulder, that you did the best you could, and that's all we can ask for.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, hey guys, man, we can continue this on for another 30 minutes or so, or another hour, but Sean, we'll definitely get together for to finish this up on a part 4 series, as we talked about the 11 fatal flaws of leadership. And I can't think, we've got a lot of people who are online. We've got Randy, Sean, Lance, so many other people are on. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And, everybody's here because of Sean. They're not here, for me. They're here because of Sean. So,
Well,
so,
I need
so,
the
so thank
chief.
you.
I don't know. I can't see who's on, but I want to say shout out to my Louisiana crew, Lance and my man Sir Paul over there,
So Lance is on, Miguel is on, Bruce is on, and
my man Miguel.
Kaylin is on, and Francis is on. So yeah.
And I got to get
So
Bruce back because we haven't talked about the circus incident. My man Bruce is an amazing, amazing. I met him as a bomb tech, but he's a super smart guy. He trains all the very elite teams in law enforcement all over the country, and he's a rock
mhm,
star guy. That he doesn't get any limelight or fanfare. He's always behind the scenes in the background. But
mhm,
that we could definitely talk about that. How he and I met was at what turned out to be an international incident.
mhm.
That was a really cool story that he was a very good part of. So, and my man Miguel, keep fighting the fight, brother. My
All right.
man Miguel is an amazing sergeant out in Ohio. He's just going through a little health challenge right now, and just letting him know he's in my thoughts and prayers. So, and my
Yeah.
daughter Kaylin, my biggest fan club. I'm seeing some of the notes. We got my first granddaughter coming in 2 weeks. So we got a
No.
lot of
Okay.
exciting stuff happening. Book maybe on the way. Awesome stuff. So
Yeah.
thank you very much to everybody who was here as well. From me as well.
Yeah. Somebody puts in. I should say thanks for having Grandpa Sean on. Congratulations. That was Randy, and Bruce says, hey, Mama, 2 rock stars in Bob and Sean. So great.
Amen.
Again, again, it's just my pleasure of having you on, Sean, and everybody else being a part of this important conversation, as we talked about, your book, The 11 Fatal Flaws of Leadership. And man, this book is going to be flying off the shelf, Sean. It's, you know, it, people are not going to. You're going to be out on a tour, you know, a book signing tour, Sean. I can see it.
Well, it's
I'll be there.
everybody that's here has been a huge supporter, and I've learned so much from everybody, you know, especially Bob, like I said before, but everybody that's here. And it really is, it means the world to me, you know, to have this support, and to have, and even for people like yourself, Chief, you know, that you didn't know me, and to validate these ideas, and to know that at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is pay it forward, and, you know, and help this next generation of leaders get it right, and not have to struggle through some of the failures that we did because we didn't know any better, or no one taught us. Because as we know now, and you mentioned it before, a lot of people are thrust into leadership roles now. Everybody left. I left. You know, we all left around the same time, the Great Resignation, and now you've got people that huge gaps. Everybody left with all the institutional knowledge. They're thrust into a role they're not ready for, and now what? So we, like I said, we can either make fun of them that, you know, they're not ready. It's like making fun of someone that's drowning in the deep end, or you can throw them a lifeline, train them up, help them, make them mentally and tactically stronger and strategically stronger, and, you know, give them a fighting chance, especially in the climate of policing has never been more challenging than it is today.
Exactly. Well, hey guys, you know, we're going to wrap it up. And again, we're going to be getting together to do part 4 of the 11 fatal flaws of leadership. So I want to remind, if you haven't checked out our YouTube page, go to our YouTube page, subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. It's all free. Go to our You and the Law Facebook page, like, share, follow. And this broadcast, if you missed any parts of this, it will be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. You're going to be able to listen to the rebroadcast of this episode. So Sean, Robert, thank you both for coming on, and everybody just stay tuned, because we're going to be coming back with part 4 of the 11 fatal flaws of leadership. So awesome. Everybody have a good night, and Sean, let everybody know how they can get the book.
Sure. You just for the pre-order of the book, it should be ready in a couple of weeks. It's just coming back from the graphic designer right now. The way you can pre-order is you have to put the www in at the beginning to keep it secure, but it's www.aioleadership.com/book. If that gives you a difficult time, you can just go to aioleadership.com, and there's a button right at the top that says pre-order, either way. And then they can reach out to me directly, either through any of the social media, LinkedIn, or my direct email is my initials, sc@aioleadership.com.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody, again, thank you for tuning in tonight. Sean, thank you. Robert, thank you. And make sure you tune in next Thursday for another informative topic right here on You and the Law podcast. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
That's a wrap on this episode of You and the Law podcast. We've got more eye-opening conversations and hard-hitting insights coming your way, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and stay ready, because the next episode might just change the way you see law enforcement